little bit. Let's talk about finishes. Finishes make a difference. I have people come to me and tell me that no, there's no way a finish can make a difference. It makes a difference, a big difference. That one is going to be very warm. Lacquer is very warm, very traditional sounding. The black nickel projects real well. So this one here, like I had in my hands before, the black nickel projects really well. It also has a little darker sound, still very vibrant. We have actually saxophones that we put no finish on them, and those are called Mad Megs, and that's a whole nother story, but we came up with some kind of fun names. That happens to be, if I can remember right, happens to be an old cannon from Europe, and it was called the Mad Meg, and it was really ugly and big, and I don't know, we just adopted that name. But no finish at all on an instrument will be very vibrant, and generally a little bit darker. Again, it depends on your mouthpiece. You want to experiment with mouthpieces as you go along. And then we have different finishes. Oh, we have one called the Brute, and it's a dip that we do that actually takes the unlacquered saxophone and actually turns it dark and color it a little bit. It's supposed to look like it just came out of Grandma's attic 60 years ago, from 60 years ago. So that's the Brute. It's still unlacquered, and then we've got different keys, and believe it or not, even with the keys being different. So if you have black anodized nickel saxophone with gold lacquer keys, it's going to warm it up, where the silver is going to give a little more brilliance to the sound. Yeah. So here's we're passing around some brochures. You can take a look at that, glance at some of the different finishes that we actually manufacture. My wife and I started looking in music books. And so we'd open it and we'd look at Allegro and Vivace, and no, that didn't look any fun. And then we started looking at different periods in time. Medieval period was one of them. And so 13th century, that era, and so it was big on castles and cannons and knights and cannonballs and that kind of thing. So that's kind of how that's actually how we came up with the name. I really love how Cannonball played. A lot of people think that's how we came up with the name, but it's really not. It's the castles and the cannons. So as long as we've opened it up, let's have some more questions. You guys have some questions? Yes. What's my favorite instrument? Well, gosh, in college it used to depend on the day. I used to love bassoon. Bassoon was my major, but I kept going back to saxophone. I guess maybe saxophone is probably something I really love to play a lot of. But I think also for me, being a doubler, I like switching off. I like playing, maybe the clarinet and then the flute and then the piccolo. It just makes for a lot of fun. Really a lot of fun. Yeah?
Your vintage reborn, how would you compare that to your Brute?
Vintage reborn. Well, the Brute is a finish. And a lot of people get mixed up with this. So Brute is a finish, and you can get that in vintage, reborn, or you can get it in Big Bell. And so I would say it's very open, very resonant. It's a cool look. The reason so many people like it, and it's our second best-selling saxophone below the black nickel. Black nickel is first, is because it's just a dip, and it will change as you touch it. So I like to say, at Cannonball, we like to say that it'll wear like an old doorknob. So the more you touch it, it's going to lighten up in some of those areas like that. But phenomenal sounding instrument. Gosh, there's a lot of our professionals that's the instrument they play. They prefer because of the sound. So, yeah, good question. Really good. Anybody? Yes. I played on a Selmer soprano for years, back when I was a professional, and did that for a living. And how do I say this? Of course, I like our sopranos better. And in fact, there are some things that I changed on our modern soprano today. inside the tube, for example. That's one thing that helps them play really well in tune. We have an endorsing company, or an endorsing group called the New Century Saxophone Quartet. And if you look them up online, you can hear how well they play in tune. Even the soprano player, which a lot of times, that is the hard instrument to play in tune, right? And so he does a phenomenal job, and that's one good example you can listen to. But I think our sopranos play extremely well in tune. The big bell comes with the two necks. We have a curved neck and a straight neck, and then we have a vintage soprano also that comes with no necks. We've done a lot of experiments, and I think one of the things I think in the back of my mind is if I could make a saxophone with no breaks at all, like the neck and the body and everything together without pulling it apart and putting it back together, I think it would play much better, you know. And so I prefer the vintage soprano that we have now. Yeah, it's a wonderful instrument. We've had tremendous success with that. Again, it had to do with inside the tube. We worked on different things to make that instrument play much better than the traditional instruments of years ago. And we feel like that we really accomplished that. So excellent question. And then we also make one called an arc, where the bell curves out just a little bit. And that came about. I don't know if you've watched soprano players, but when they play, a lot of times they do this, right? They bring the soprano up, and I think that's because they're trying to get the sound out into the audience, maybe. And so we make one that naturally does that. The bell curves out a little bit and brings the sound back into the audience. I really enjoy playing that too.
Does that one have a curved neck?
It can, yes, that one is a big bell, and it does have a straight and a curved neck, and phenomenal horn. And if you're looking to get one down the road, make sure you get the stand that comes with it. There's an actual curved soprano stand, because the bell is in such a shape that you can't set it down, you know, straight, because it kind of curved a little bit. But wonderful playing instrument, really, really great. The thing that we do at Cannonball, and we're passionate about it, is something I mentioned earlier when we were talking, and that is trying to make all the instruments play to their optimum. And so, to my knowledge, I think Cannonball is the only one that does what we do. There's acoustical changes that we make on every single instrument, from our student Alcazar all the way up to our professional saxophone, where we go in and we equal out the scale, for instance. If you're an alto player or even a tenor player, almost every tenor and alto I played before Cannonball, the D is sharp on the staff. You go to play D and it plays sharp, and that's because the octave tube is in a certain place that divides the instrument for certain notes. But the farther you get away from that optimum thing, it's just a compromise. And that is the worst compromise. That's a terrible note on the saxophone. Well, to combat that, we actually go in and we actually change a part of the saxophone on the inside tube that actually helps that D to land in its pocket. Another bad note is C sharp. You know, you go from D to C sharp, and where does it go? It goes a little flat. And so there's ways to go in and actually change that and move that pitch a little bit. And so that's kind of fun. And that's, if I leave here, which I will in a day, and I go back home, the thing I want you to remember is that is really what's different about Cannonball, is we can go in and we can actually change each pitch, the timbre, the altissimo better, or whatever needs to be done on that instrument to line it up to make it play to its optimum. So, oh, heavens, colorful. Let's see, what's my most versatile? I don't know. That's a really hard question. I think that you can do a lot of fun things with the black nickel. So there's a good one. Black nickel projects really well. Like years ago, I outfitted Cheryl and I outfitted the Tower Power horn section. You guys know who Tower Power is? Okay, they played Cannonball for about 3 years ago, and they bought the black nickel. That's the horn they wanted, because it had a lot of punch to it, and that black nickel would project really well to the back of the hall. And if you know how those guys play, there's a lot of punchy sounds that they do. And so that was a good choice. But on the other spectrum, I think this is probably the most versatile. On the other spectrum, you take that black nickel and you put a classical mouthpiece on it, and you sit in the concert band, and you can be really dark and blend with the clarinets and the flutes. Works really, really well. So I like the black nickel. I think that's a good choice. That's probably our number one. Well, I did tell you that. It's our number one selling. So our saxophones are all power forged. I want to talk about that for a moment. Power forging is a heat treat process where you heat up the brass and then you cool it down at a timed interval. So like this really hot flame hits the bell, and then it's there for a while until the time is up, and then it's cooled down. We do that 3 times on the bell, once on the body, and twice on the neck. And that's how we get that real focused sound on the saxophone. Some of the less expensive instruments in the industry, the annealing process isn't done right, and I believe that's why you don't have a focus or a core to the sound. You get more of a spread sound. So that's something that's very, very important that's done right. All of our metal on our saxophone keys is all power forged. There's nothing that's cast. And power forged is, and there's a big machine from me to the wall, huge big machine, and it comes down and stamps out keys out of a solid block of metal or a solid block of brass. And cast keys are where you pour hot metal into a cast, and then it hardens up. And that's not the way to do it.